Now available for the first time in paperback. Stop Simping in the Workplace. Men, learn what you need to know in order to protect your job from workplace predators with Stop Simping in the Workplace. Available in paperback at online booksellers everywhere. When I made my appearance on Obsidian Radio a couple of weeks ago, I talked about a new nonfiction book I've been working on for the last few weeks. And that new nonfiction book I've been working on is called The Man Crisis. Now, this Man Crisis book, like Stop Simping in the Workplace, comes out of many of the YouTube videos I've done on what I believe to be a crisis going on as related to the state of men here in the United States and the West. And the reason why we have a crisis here in the United States as related to men, I believe, is due primarily to the way we have been raising men for the last 50 years. And because a large majority of men in America over the last 50 years have been raised in single mother households that were created through illegitimate out-of-wedlock births or divorce through no-fault divorce, or raised in two-parent homes with beta male fathers, I really believe we have a man crisis, because when it comes down to most of those boys who grew up to become men over the last 3 generations, many of those boys did not get the life skills they needed from men to be able to function out here like a healthy man. And because those men did not get the life skills they needed to be able to survive and function as a healthy man, this is why many of these men are malfunctioning, short-circuiting, and falling completely apart in this life. And the reason why they're short-circuiting, malfunctioning, and falling apart is because when it comes down to many of those men, again, they did not get the life lessons and the life skills they needed from men, because there was no man to teach them those life skills. And that's why we have men in a complete state of crisis right now, because when I look at the state of men here in America, it's in one of the most dire states it's ever been in. Here we have in America a whole state of men where we have more men getting on drugs and alcohol to medicate their pain, and we have suicides among men at the highest levels they've ever been at. And we have many men literally checking out of life and not even trying to get jobs or trying to do anything with their lives, because they see no place for themselves in the world anymore. And when I look at the violence that's been going on, like these mass shootings and like many other acts of violence that many people don't want to talk about, like the suicides that are going on among men, I see a serious crisis as related to the whole state of men. But no one in the media wants to talk about the crisis regarding men, because in gynocentric media, everything is all about the woman and all about elevating the woman and all about not holding this woman accountable for what she did to the state of men. Because the feminist movement over the last 50 years has gone on a war to destroy the image of men, has gone on a war to malign the image of men, and has gone on a war to try to change the image of men. And in the process of their social engineering of this kinder, gentler, softer male, they have created a Frankenstein monster who is worse than his father. Now, the original plan that the feminists had for the social engineering campaign was to create a kinder, gentler, softer male who would be more in touch with his feelings and would be a better man than his father. However, over the last 50 years, what these feminists have created in these single-parent homes and these homes with beta male fathers is a ticking time bomb. And what's scary about this ticking time bomb is that we have 2 to 3 generations of these ticking time bombs out here, and we don't know what they will do when they will go off. And these men are literally like landmines all across the country. And what's really scary is, again, we don't know what they will do or what destruction they're capable of participating in when they wind up going off. Because one of the big problems with these males that have been raised in these homes is that these men are filled with a lot of anger. And the reason why these men are filled with a lot of anger is because a lot of these men were told by their mothers that the world would work a certain way for them. Because when it came down to the feminists told everyone that they were equal. And when these boys thought that they were equal to women, they thought they would get equal opportunity. Unfortunately, the world has judged these boys as they grew up to become men as men, and they have actually asked them to actually behave and act just like men. Unfortunately, many of these boys, they grew up in these single mother households, and they were raised primarily by female authority figures. And because they were raised by female authority figures, they were raised with feminine social traits and feminine social behaviors. Now, what happens is that these boys grow up, they become men, and then they're expected to behave and socialize like men. And that's when these guys start to short circuit, and that's when they try to reconcile the logic that their mothers told them about the world with the way the world sees men as men, and the way world expects them to behave as men. And that's what the short circuit leads to them eventually malfunctioning, and then eventually simmering and boiling in that anger, and then they eventually explode in a rage where they wind up not only destroying the lives of innocent people like these mass shooters, but the lives of themselves as well. And the reason why this is happening, again, is because of the way we have been raising men over the last 50 years, but no one wants to point the finger at the woman who said that she could raise a boy to be a man, because it was those feminists who told us that they could raise a boy to be a man and that she could raise a boy to be a better man. But when we look at society right now, many of those men are not better than their fathers. In fact, they are worse than their fathers, and the world is falling apart because they cannot function like their fathers due to the faulty programming and the faulty feminist culture they were taught over the last 50 years, a culture that has not benefited those men and has led to those men not being able to function in a healthy way at all. Now, in the man crisis, I go in depth talking about this man crisis that's going on, because when we look at the state and condition of men in American and Western civilization, it is a crisis, because many of these boys who have grown up to become men under this feminist and gynocentric culture, many of these men just cannot do the basic things that their fathers could do or their grandfathers could do, and they don't have the survival skills to do what their fathers or their grandfathers could do, and being able to set up and build a life for themselves, because they were never taught these life skills by their mothers, and because they never got the information from their fathers to become whole and complete men, they will never be able to go out here and do these things, because these women wanted to make this better man. But again, this better man just can't function in society because he only has half of the life skills he needs to be a whole man. And that's why all these men are falling completely apart. And that's why we have a man crisis right now. And this man crisis is one of those things that's going to get worse instead of better, because most people just don't want to acknowledge the problem. And the reason why they don't want to acknowledge the problem is because, again, they don't want to point the finger at the women who created the problem and hold them accountable for creating this culture that is destructive to boys and destructive to men, because their whole approach to raising boys has led to us raising 3 generations of extremely dysfunctional men, and those men are falling completely apart, and they are incapable of doing the things that men are supposed to do, because they were never taught the way to do things that men were supposed to do. Now, there are a certain series of life skills that only a man can teach another man, and I go in depth in that on the man crisis, and I go in depth with regarding the concepts of manhood and masculinity and in the man crisis, because These concepts have not been taught to the last 2 to 3 generations of men because they did not have fathers in their lives and they did not have male figures in their lives to teach them to them. So a lot of these men who are growing up now, they are not getting the life skills that they need, and that's why many of these men can't get up off their mother's sofas. This is why they cannot get out and go to work, and this is why a lot of these guys wind up falling completely apart, why many of these guys wind up becoming frustrated, why a lot of these men wind up growing up to become angry, and why they wind up going out here again and participating in self-destructive behaviors like drugs, alcohol, or going out here and participating in acts of violence like domestic violence or mass shootings in extreme cases. We have a sad situation and sad state of affairs with men, and the only way we're going to start to solve the problem is to acknowledge the problem, because when it comes down to men here in America, men are in crisis, men are suffering, and they're told to just be a man about it. Unfortunately, with a large majority of men coming out of homes where they were raised without fathers, they can't be men because they were never taught how to be men. And I go in depth talking about this in The Man Crisis, and The Man Crisis will be out later this year, and I'm urging everyone to pick up a copy of this book, because this is the book where we really deal with this problem regarding the declining state of men and the problems most people aren't hearing about men, because gynocentric media does not want to talk about the crisis going on regarding men.